Good afternoon. When I was coming over here, I thought of Justice Louis Brandeis. He was the first Jew to serve on the Supreme Court of the United States. And over 100 years ago, before he was on the court, he gave a famous speech in Boston, Massachusetts, and he said, to become better Americans, we must become better Jews, and to become better Jews, we must become Zionists. All of us here are proud Zionists. We wouldn't be here if we weren't, and we know the centrality of Zion to the people of Israel, to the Jewish people. We know the words of the Psalm, Im eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yamini, if I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its strength. And we know that Zionism is the national liberation movement of the Jewish people. And we come here today with the commandment of Pidyon Shvuim, the redemption of captives, very important in our tradition. And there are approximately 101 hostages still left in Gaza. We think at least 35 of them are no longer alive. In January, I spent a couple weeks in Israel, and I had the opportunity to visit Otef Aza twice. And one of those visits, I was standing at the home of the Bibas family in Nir Oz. Kfir was about 8 or 9 months when he was taken, and his brother and his mother and father were all taken to Gaza. As far as we know, that's where they still are. And 1/4, Nir Oz was only 400 and some people. 1/4, one out of every four people in that kibbutz were killed, were murdered on October 7th, or taken hostage. And as I was guided around Nir Oz by a woman who lived there, and she and her son had survived the massacre on that day. Her young son, she and her young son had survived. And as she took me through the homes, they were all blackened, they were all burned. And the terrorists, Amalek, had ripped out the gas lines of the stoves and ignited them to burn the Jews out of their mamadim, so the Jews would have no choice. They would either asphyxiate or emerge and be murdered. That's what the Amalekites, the terrorists, did on that day. And in front of every home was a poster of the person or persons who had been taken from that home and murdered or taken captive. And in the dining hall of the kibbutz were posters showing photos of several Thai workers from Thailand who had been taken hostage from kibbutz Nir Oz. Those men too, so far as we know, are still held hostage in Gaza. So we are all here because we feel like we want to act. We want to do something. We don't want to just engage in hand-wringing. Rabbi Tarfon said, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, velo ata ben chorin libatal mimena. It's not your task to finish the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. So none of us are free to desist from the work, even if so many people, including so many of our fellow Jews, do nothing. And that's the tradition, that's the history. We know that most Jews in the Galut will do nothing, will ignore, and will eventually leave our people. You know that Rashi said that when the Tanakh says that that when Am Yisrael left Mitzrayim, that they left chamushim. So most people think that means armed, chamushim, right? Chamushim, but Rashi says no. It means that 4/5 of Am Yisrael turned back and went back into Mitzrayim. So in history, we know many people are leaving Yisrael. They don't make a big declaration. They just sort of drift away, right? But we are the core, and we must make the Jewish future. Now, what can we do? So, the greatest thing is what Rona's daughter did, make Aliyah and serve in Sahal. That's the greatest thing, right? And then there are other young people, like my kids have gone over since the war began and volunteered. There are young people here. I urge you to do that, to go volunteer, or even better, take a gap year, study in Israel, maybe do machal. Then there's Rona, who's a heroine, of course. She's as somebody said, she's a social media star and an educator, and she teaches and she visits Israel, and she does something for Israel and the Jewish people every single day. I'm kind of limited. I'm in the judicial branch, so I'm not allowed to do politics. I speak like this, and I write when I can, and I visit Israel. I teach there every year. But you all, unlike me, each and every one of you, because I don't see Danny Butler here, so I think I'm right about this, all of you have all of your First Amendment rights. See, I had to park some of my First Amendment rights when I went on the bench, and that's over 20 years ago, and it's still maybe a few years before I hang it up. We'll see. But while I'm in the judiciary, I can't do what you can do in politics, and you should not look down on it. Whatever you think about politics, whether you're right wing or you're left wing or you're Democrat or you're Republican or you're independent or anything, get involved. Make your voice heard. If you don't show strength, if you don't lobby elected officials, then they'll take you for granted. The opposition, the friends of the Amalekites, are not quiet. You hear them, you see them, right? So why should Jews be quiet? Now, of course, you aren't, because you're here. But you know Jews and friends of Israel who are not Jewish, who are not here right now. But you could convince them. They're your friends. You could work on them. You could get them involved. Maybe you should run for office yourself. Maybe you have a friend who should run for office herself or himself. Maybe you have a friend who would be a good candidate, and you should get behind that person. Raise money for them. Raise support for them. Get them involved. Maybe there's somebody in office you don't think is supportive of Israel and the Jewish people. Maybe you should get up and work to defeat that person. It begins with you. It may not end with you, but it begins with you. Get involved in the process. Write, speak, get active. And I know you're all active. You're here. So I'm actually asking you to reach out to people you know and get them active. There's nothing more important than fighting for the future of the Jewish people. You should all teach your kids, and I know you do, about three things: Torah Yisrael, Am Yisrael, and Eretz Yisrael. Critically important for our future. And always be loud and be proud. We get no respect when we show no self-respect. Respect is accorded to those who are strong, who respect themselves, their people, their identity. We're done cringing, like Rona said, right? We're not ghetto Yidden, right? We stand up strong and straight and demand your rights. It was over 100 years ago that Zev Jabotinsky wrote one of his thousands of great works. This one was called Against Apology. And he wrote many things in this feuilleton. There are French speakers here. You can correct my pronunciation. But in this feuilleton, Jabotinsky wrote that we're the children of Abraham and Sarah. We came before, and we will leave after. We're too old to sit for anybody's examination. We're not apologizing. We're good for ourselves. And I want to say that even for those of us or those of our friends, because all of you feel the urgency, but many of you have friends who don't feel the urgency. And you should remind them of the words, Ure banim levanecha shalom al Yisrael, to see children born to your children and peace on Israel. If you think, or your friends think, this is not an urgent situation, ask them to imagine, with what's going on, what they anticipate for the future of their children and their children's children in the Galut. Right? And that's an inspiration to work for the future of the Jewish people. Thank you, and God bless.